Welcome back to the Spiced Bronz community. If you're new here, please subscribe, and if the information resonates with you, go ahead and hit that like button. Okay, so today I felt the need to dive into the intersectionality of structural racism, conservatism, Christian nationalism, and the Southern strategy. Don't worry if those terms seem new to you or some of them seem new to you. Just stick around to the end, and I'll ensure you get a firm grasp on what they are and how they function, but importantly, how these ideologies have shaped and is continuing to shape U.S. policy at the expense of the marginalized. Okay, so on this slide, you'll see Orwell. Why did I shout out to Orwell? Well, if you've never read Orwell's Animal Farm, this book basically, although published in 1945, gives us the keys to what's happening right now inside the US as opposed to in Russia and Britain. He uses animals to demonstrate how unchecked power corrupts. He shows blind loyalty and how lies replace the truth. And so, if you haven't read this book, I would strongly urge you to go ahead and do so because it's pretty good and it's prescient. Now, let's talk about the Southern strategy. Basically, what the Southern strategy is just a political strategy of white grievance. It takes white anger, failures, and their mediocrity, and it aimed it at that time at the Black community. Now it targets all communities of color, to include LGBTQIA, and they use rhetoric like states' rights and stuff like that, but they cloak it under this guise of white racism. It's just simply dangerous, but it is effective. So let's talk about the Dixiecrat. What are the Dixiecrats? The Dixiecrats were originally segregationist Democrats until the party started to embrace the plank of social change in the form of civil rights. That angered a lot of the whites, so they broke away, and they then became Dixiecrats, which are now your current Republican Party. They elected Strom Thurmond, who was at that time a staunch segregationist and a racist from South Carolina, to be the face of their party to run against Harry S. Truman. They used the now misnamed Stars and Bars, the Confederate flag, as their banner to rally under, which is nothing more than a sign of terror and hate. And it's just, in all actuality, they want you to believe it's about their heritage when it's not. It's about the treason, the white supremacy, the secession, and a whitewash lost cause, which is what they still want to rally under. They think the South will rise again, so here's where we are. And the lost cause is basically they're pretending that the states and the civil rights and the Civil War, happened because of states' rights as opposed to slavery. It did not. It happened because of slavery, but you can't tell them that. So this is from Thurman. This is the face of their Dixiecrats who they chose to run against Harry Truman. He was a staunch segregationist. He believed in and campaigned on preserving Jim Crow. He was against anything that resembled fair and equitable treatment of Black people. He was against the Civil Rights Act of 64, the Voting Rights Act of 65, anything that dealt with fair housing for Blacks at that time. Even after the win of Brown v. Board, he still didn't want schools integrated. He was basically quoted as saying, all the laws of Washington and all the bayonets of the army cannot force a Negro into our homes, our school, and our churches. The crazy thing, though, about this guy is that he fathered a Black daughter. Her name was Essie Mae Washington Williams. She was born in October of 1925. And before she died in February 2013, she revealed his little secret that he was, in fact, her father. And her mom at the time of 1925 was 16, so more than likely he essayed her mother. So this guy, Trent Lott, was a sitting Republican senator. He was the Senate Majority Leader at the time, and he, of course, resigned his seat because he praised his mentor, racist Strom Thurmond, who pretended, that he changed his stances, but his damage was already done. So again, the Dixiecrats are nothing more than Democrat segregationists that broke away and became now your present Republican Party. So that's what they are. In walks conservatism. What is conservatism? Basically, what they are is supposed to be framed in a limited government. They didn't want the government to come in and tell them how to manage their states, whether on a personal or economic level. They believed in, or do believe in, the traditional family. They oppose anything that dealt with civil rights, taxation, and they always talk about a strong military. So for them, the modern day father of conservatism is William Buckley Jr. He promoted the Gentile races. So the Gentile races was that so-called intellectualist. It was that person who could package all the words up correctly, didn't sound offensive, and he came from that angle, but he was still nothing more than a racist. And he supposedly, moderated his positions, but his damage was already done. This here is just an older version of him, but he still was a catalyst for racism, and he will always be known for that. He opposed everything that dealt with civil rights, affirmative action, school integrations, any and everything. They all have that one through line in common. They were racist. They hated anything that dealt with civil rights, and they let it be known. No matter how they let it be known, they did let it be known. And so they were able to gather more white votes because of this Southern strategy. And so here's where we still sit to this present day. What was the catalyst? The catalyst was two men that embraced that change, and that was Harry Truman and that was Lyndon Baines Johnson. Harry Truman went up against Strom Thurmond. Thank God he won. He embraced, he created that Committee on Civil Rights in '46, and he banned discrimination within the federal government and the U.S. military. So thank God he beat out Strom Thurmond. And then, of course, LBJ, he worked on the Great Society. And in the initiatives for the Great Society, he reduced poverty in the form of job training and food assistance. He signed into law, rather, the Civil Rights Act of '64, the Voting Rights Act of '65 to combat racial discrimination. He initiated Head Start, affordable housing, environmental protection, and of course, that affects the minority communities. And he created the Coroner Commission. And this is where I'll take the time to plug Professor Jelani's Cobb book, The Essential Coroner Commission Report. And if you haven't read that, that's also an excellent book. So, but whatever it was, it caused these racists to crash out. So there's where we are. And let's talk about the toxic ingredients. These are the people, and by no means is this list exhaustive. I mean, there are so many people that could have been on this list, but these are just some of the key figures. And as you notice, I cross out Orrin Hatch and put in Jesse Helms because he was definitely a key figure for what we're talking about today. And if you don't know who he is, I strongly encourage you to go ahead and do your own independent research. So let's start with Barry Goldwater. Barry Goldwater was a Arizona senator who ran against LBJ after the assassination of John F. Kennedy Jr. And like Thurman, he was staunchly opposed to any civil rights legislation. He wanted to privatize Social Security. Sounds familiar? He believed in states' rights. He considered civil rights. Any activist, communist, aka MLK, they considered him and they called him a communist. They tracked him. They did all that kind of stuff. And of course, that worked for the already angry whites. And he galvanized them under that type of rhetoric. He was against labor unions. Again, sound familiar? Because this is what they are against in present day times. But if Goldwater set the stage for coded nasty politics, wait till you find out about this guy. This guy is called Lee Atwater. Lee Atwater gave that coded language breath, legs, everything. Lee Atwater was a strategist. He was a consultant. He consulted with George H.W. Bush as well as Ronald Reagan. And he was a strategist that taught them how to say the N word without saying the N word. So basically, he used coded language like welfare, inner city, busing. So if that doesn't sound familiar, what about CRT, DEI, or woke? Because that's what they're using now in the form of what used to be. So they're using that type of language to where it's coded, but you know who they're talking to and who they're talking about. And so this is how he helped to galvanize the so-called current Republican Party, where he used that nasty but coded language to where he could say what he wanted to say, but in a form that wasn't so outright in your face. So Lee Atwater, I had to give him a shout out, even though he wasn't on that list. He was one of the masterminds behind Ronald Reagan, as well as George H.W. Bush. George H.W. Bush had the the Willie Horton ad, and Ronald Reagan, of course, used the welfare queens. And that's how they became up on top. And if you look at some of these pictures, notice any familiar faces. Roger Stone, Paul Manafort, those were two alumni from the Nixon's cabinet. And hey, look at what we got there. Lee Atwater with present day Donald Trump, Bellin president. So there's a through line between those guys as well. So, but to break into the Democratic South, they had to come up with a strategy, and because they started to embrace those planks of civil rights, the parties flipped. So the Democrats became the Republicans, and the Republicans became the Democrats, and that was essentially up under the guise of your Southern strategy. So, and that's some more of those faces in the well there for you, so that you can see who these people are, and they're still around till this day, minus Cohen. And so let's talk about Jesse Helms. Jesse Helms was a North Carolina senator, and he gave white supremacists shelter and comfort. He was openly hostile to civil rights. He made sure racism was turned into structural policies just like everybody else. He created the White Hands ad against, at the time, former Charlotte, excuse me, Charlotte mayor and an architect, a black architect by the name of Harvey Gantt. He ran against him in the U.S. Senate race, and of course Jesse Helms won because again he used that white grievance and was able to just do so much damage. And he never moderated. And people will try to whitewash his legacy, his history, his behavior, but you just can't, because that guy just did so much damage, and he made it structural racism because they put it into policy. Next up on the list, oh my God, this guy right here, President Ronald Reagan. He went from Hollywood to a politician. Ronald Reagan is the single most politician who destroyed America, and that's regardless of your race, your gender, but specifically he tore through the black community. How did he do that? He started with gutting the social safety nets. He reduced taxes on the wealthy, this trickle down economics. He cut food stamps. He taxed Social Security benefits, Medicare, Medicaid. He gave us justices like Scalia, Kennedy. He put Thomas in charge of the Equal Opportunity Commission, which terrible disaster because he's no friend of equal rights or civil rights. He appointed William Bradford Reynolds as the AG of the Civil Rights Department. And of course, that's like putting a fox in a hen house, because that guy was not against anything. He was for anything that was for civil rights. And of course, you'll see Nixon and Reagan spewing out their hate there. That was caught during a quote. But this is just some more of Reagan's terrible policies. I mean, his policy just essentially tore through and is currently to this day tearing through America. But if you let people tell it, they're Reagan Republicans. And so I just give them the side eye, because this guy weakened so much stuff. He just ripped away so much stuff that FDR put in, anything that LBJ, that Truman, Carter, anybody else, he just ripped it away. And so this guy he's just the epitome of terrible in forms of politics and policies. And so here he is with Jerry Falwell, who was a leading white evangelical figure. And so in walks, guess what? The religious right, the white evangelicals, and their Catholic base. So this is how that line between separation of church and state. Nope, it was never about pro-life. It was always about racism and bigotry, and they were able to use the skies of religion or morality to get away with their Christian nationalism and being just openly hostile to anything that dealt with civil rights, that dealt with loving who you wanted to. And the crazy thing is they're hypocrites, because most of those guys, even still to this day, have mistresses, they are raping kids, they are paying for abortions, they promote the patriarchy and misogyny, and they're still from the poor. So it's just kind of crazy. And Jerry Falwell, the founder of Liberty University and so much other stuff. I mean, this guy they just pretended it was about, morality, when all the while it was about helping to extend and perpetuate racism. And it's just crazy how everyone says they're conservatives. Next, we have Phyllis Schlafly. Got to get the trad wife in there. She was the trad wife, but the crazy thing is she worked outside of the home. She was a lawyer, she was a writer, she was an activist. She was against the Equal Rights Amendment. She was against feminism. She supported these gender roles. She was against gay rights. But all the while, this conservative worked outside of the home. Family values, family values, family values. These people are just, but this is how they grab and make more changes and do stuff. So in walks this current thing, the eugenics. I mean, people say, well, it's about nothing. This naivete is just crazy. You can't support these types of rhetorics and think that it's not about politics and character because it is. This woman said these things. She pretends that it's not what it is, but you can't say genes with the G and then try to, write it out and put the genes with the J because you are this blonde, white, blue hair, this blonde hair, blue eyes woman. What else are you talking about when you're talking about genes? So, but these are just distractions nonetheless. But the thing that we got to stay focused on is the Heritage Foundation and the Federalist Society. These are the guys who gave us Project 2025. These are the ones who always work behind the scenes to make sure the conservative policies were in effect to maintain structural racism. These are the guys who craft the policies and push them through. They get their wins through the judicial system. And so everything else is a sidebar distraction, and we can't get distracted because the Heritage Foundation and the Federalist Society are also helping to extend and rebrand white nationalism. And so if you don't know about Project 2025, I encourage you to read it. It is a 900 and I think 80 page plan blueprint. And basically the Republicans in Congress have ceded their power to the legislative branch to where they're not doing anything but rubber stamping everything and anything. And they pretend to be conservatives and religious. But again, it's the same hypocritical rhetoric and behavior. So again, we go back to George Orwell, who plays it up really nicely and lets you know, hey, these people are not serious because they're rewriting everything in the form of book bans, rewriting everything in the form of censorship. Um, the redlining has become gerrymandering, where they pick their voters as opposed to the other way around. So you don't have to worry about where you're going to go as far as your district because they're doing everything. They've made DEI, diversity, a bad word. So sound again familiar. So anything that deals with diversity, they're not for it, even though diversity, equity, inclusion, and access deals with things that everyone needs. So no longer do you have to worry about counting the jelly beans in the jar when you have restricted covenants and you have strict voter ID laws and you have things that help purge voters from the lists and you have the ICE raids, you have these masked accomplices of the state going out and just taking people off the streets. Whether you're a U.S. citizen or not, they're taking everybody. It's like capitalism; everything is for sale, and it's just so chaotic right now. But it's by design. And you have again Trump, who has no idea what he's doing. He has no problem with wreaking havoc on our alliances, talking about our alliances and then dignitaries and trying to embarrass people. But what do? Your job is to maintain your peace and balance by reclaiming your voice, telling our stories. It's about loving on us. It's about sharing who we are with each other and to not let them silence us. It's about making sure that you balance your physical and your mental health. It's about you making sure that we share our stories. We don't allow them to take away our history, to take away our voices, no matter what that form may be. So this is why I continuously harp on, the culture, Spiced Bronz, as far as that platform for telling our stories to make sure that we don't get erased. So in doing that, I'm going to start recommending some reading material. So one of the things, the Fire Upon Us, this is a debate between James Baldwin and William Buckley Jr. So this is actually a pretty good book, and you'll see how William Buckley is and his so-called intellectualism. Another book that I would recommend is Southern Politics. It talks about the Southern strategy and how it's not just, contained in the South because you got races all over. And then a couple of more books that I'm going to recommend to you talks about Ronald Reagan and how he basically is a myth too. He's also being whitewashed because his policies are still to this day decimating everything. And the crazy part is most of these policies haven't been overturned. And then this here is just some of the references that I used so that you can go back if you want to and look it up. But again, head out to the channel, give me some love with your subscriptions and your thumbs up, and make sure you visit the Etsy store. In the meantime, take care of yourselves, and I will see you back here shortly. Talk to you later.